In the dark fantasy world of Nebula, a young boy named Sid lived a peaceful life in a small village on the outskirts of the kingdom. The villagers were simple folk, living off the land and tending to their farms and livestock. But one day, everything changed. The sky turned dark as a fleet of alien ships descended upon the village. The villagers were caught off guard and many were killed or taken as prisoners. Sid, who had been out hunting in the woods, watched in horror as his home was destroyed and his family was captured. Fueled by fear and a desire for revenge, Sid set out on a journey to save his family and defeat the aliens. He traveled through forests and mountains, facing countless dangers along the way. He encountered strange creatures, some friendly and some deadly, and learned to use his wits and skill with a sword to survive. But the aliens proved to be formidable foes. They were led by a powerful sorcerer who wielded dark magic and seemed to have an endless army at his command. Sid soon realized that he couldn't do this alone and began to gather allies to help him in his quest. He met a band of warriors who had also lost their families to the aliens, and together they formed a resistance. They trained and planned, and soon they were ready to launch a full-scale attack on the aliens. The battle was fierce and many lives were lost, but in the end, Sid and his allies were victorious. The aliens were defeated and Sid's family was freed. But the victory was bittersweet. Sid had lost everything he had ever known and loved, and the world of Nebula would never be the same. The villagers had to rebuild their homes and lives, and Sid knew that he would never be able to return to the innocent boy he had once been. In the days and weeks that followed, Sid had nightmares of the attack, of the destruction, and of the loved ones he had lost. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding, and he knew that the memories of that day would haunt him for the rest of his life. But he also knew that he had a duty to protect the people of Nebula from any future threats. So he took up the mantle of leader of the resistance, and he swore that he would do everything in his power to keep his people safe. And so, Sid began to rebuild his life, and the world of Nebula began to recover from the nightmare that had befallen it. The sky cleared and the sun shone once again. As Sid traveled through the kingdom of Nebula, he discovered that the alien invasion was not an isolated incident. The aliens, who were known as the Zoraxians, had been systematically conquering and enslaving other worlds for centuries. They had advanced technology and powerful magic at their disposal, and they seemed almost invincible. Sid knew that he had to learn more about his enemy if he was going to have any chance of defeating them. So he set out to find any information or allies that could help him in his quest. He met a wise old wizard who had studied the Zoraxians for years and knew their weaknesses. The wizard taught Sid how to harness the power of ancient magic, and Sid began to develop his own unique abilities. He could now summon fire and lightning, and he could sense the presence of the aliens even when they were hidden. Sid also met a group of rebels who had been fighting the Zoraxians for years. They had valuable information about the aliens' plans and tactics, and they agreed to join forces with Sid. Together, they formed a powerful alliance that would become known as the Nebula Resistance. Sid and his allies traveled to different parts of the kingdom, liberating enslaved villages and gathering support from the people. They also began to sabotage the aliens' operations, destroying their weapons factories and freeing prisoners. But the Zoraxians were not going to give up easily. They launched counterattacks on the resistance, and they had a powerful weapon of their own, a giant robot known as the Zoraxian War Machine. It was said to be indestructible, and it had already decimated many resistance groups. Sid and his allies knew that they had to destroy the war machine if they were going to have any chance of winning the war. They developed a plan to infiltrate the alien stronghold and sabotage the robot from within. The plan was risky, but it worked. Sid and his allies successfully infiltrated the stronghold, and Sid was able to destroy the war machine from the inside. The explosion was massive, and it killed many of the aliens and their leaders. The war was over. The Nebula Resistance had emerged victorious, and the Zoraxians were forced to retreat. Sid had saved his people, and he had become a hero in the eyes of the kingdom. But Sid knew that the victory came at a great cost. Many lives had been lost, and the kingdom was left in ruins. He also knew that the Zoraxians would not give up easily, and they would probably return one day. So Sid and his allies began to rebuild the kingdom. They helped the villagers to restore their homes and farms, and they set up a system of defense to protect the kingdom from future invasions. Sid also had to come to terms with his own loss. His family was gone, and he had lost his innocence. But he knew that he had to keep going, to protect the people he loved, and to ensure that the nightmare of the Zoraxian invasion would never happen again. And so, Sid became the leader of the Nebula Resistance, and he was known as the savior of the kingdom. He would continue to protect his people and defend them from any threat that came their way. The nebula would be his home, and he would make sure it remained a safe and prosperous place for all its inhabitants.